Okay, I think we are live. Let me just double check. Just checking. Yes, we are live. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Come Patch With Us. Matt Hodson, and I'm joined with 2 guests again today. I'm going to introduce in a moment. This is just a real, it's just an informal get together, sharing some ideas about patching, chatting. If you're with us live, you can join us in the chat room now and participate in that, ask some questions, get involved. So yeah, let's get stuck in. Thanks for everyone who's joined us live, by the way, already. Paul, it's good to see you always when I'm streaming live. So let's get into the guests. Less talking, less chat, and more about the sound today. So first of all, let's introduce James Cigler.
Hey everybody.
Hello. Welcome to Come Patch With Us. Thanks for joining us today, James.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
If you all don't know James, go check out his YouTube page, which is just youtube.com/James Cigler. And James, just a bit of your background. You started out with playing guitars and then you got into modular, kind of the same thing as I did, actually, really.
Yeah, I feel like pedals are probably a pretty common gateway drug into the modular synth world.
Is that what it was? Just
I think so. I mean, part of it was I'd kind of slowed down playing in bands and I wanted to make music by myself. And I found, Reason, and then, got into DAWs and everything you kind of need for that. And then found the Nord Modular G2. And then through enjoying but also frustrating with that, like patching with a mouse, a friend who had one said, I have like an analog system, you should just come over and check it out. And then after that afternoon I was like, okay, well, I have to do this now. And then it was just a matter of selling whatever I could sell to start buying all these weird things.
I think that's a bit of a common story. People with guitars and then playing around with foot pedals and trying to come up with interesting sounds as this kind of gateway into it all. And then, of course, the Nord G2. For any of you out there, mine was the Nord little micro modular that I first got into. And that, that was just great. And that just, to me, I was just suddenly like, this is brilliant. You can do so much with this. I'm really into this, really connected with me, even though it was software. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a typical story. I don't know if you've met other people who have used the Nord and stuff like that before.
Yeah, definitely. There's like between like something like the Nord or even like Max or PD, there's this sort of like gravity where people like, either stay in that or kind of get flicked over to modular, or maybe they're there for a while and they start to come back to, Max and the Nord and stuff. And, they're very similar environments. It's just one is, physical and the other one is virtual. And it was really awesome to learn a lot of things in that environment with the Nord. Really, it just, for me, became like I worked on a computer all day. And then when I'd come home late at night and try and, patch on the screen with the mouse, my wrist was just sort of killing me. So I would have fully stuck with it if it weren't for, carpal tunnel or whatever.
Yeah, right. I must admit, I'm the same as you. I use computers all day long, and it's kind of nice to come and just plug in and, use something tactile to make music.
Yes.
Still really interests
yeah,
me.
Absolutely.
It's an expensive way to go about it, though. There we go. So look, James, I'm going to put some links to your stuff at the bottom of the page. Go check out his Bandcamp, Jim Drones. So James, let's just have a quick look around your rig.
Sure.
What have you, just take us through before we get into any patching, just what modules have you got in your rig?
Yeah, so my my main setup here is now a submodular 104. Oh, this is going to be interesting holding the camera backwards. Okay, there we go.
Perfect.
And it's I guess it's kind of like half make noise stuff. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the DPO and the Telharmonic, and I don't even know if I know how to make music anymore without low pass gates. So I have two opto mixes. The Contour and MATTHS end up making most of my envelope stuff up, and there's a function on the top. And the rest of the stuff is kind of what switches out most often. Although I'm not using it in the examples today, I really love this Bastel Quattro Figaro.
Oh, okay. What's this?
It's a quad VCA, and it has some handy features for setting up like auto panning between two channels, to where when you patch the control CV in, it automatically mirrors that. So not inverts it, but actually, like kind of reverses it on the unipolar spectrum. So like if you have 0 CV coming in, what comes out of the mirror is +8. And then as the input CV goes up, the mirror CV goes down. So musically, you could think of it like ducking. Right. But when you hook that into another VCA and you set that VCA open, what you end up with is, like how you'd patch up a panner with 2 VCAs. And then there's 2 pairs of that. And all those things can be used independently. So I'll usually use this as like VCAs for mixing or control signals. And I'm also using this mirroring function with the envelopes in the other system to get mirrored outputs.
Yeah. I'd imagine you can use that for setting up interesting compression patches and whatnot as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So like anything where like ducking is involved, I'll be using that, or anywhere where I want like maybe resonance and cutoff to kind of move in opposite directions, or FM depth be separate from something else. It ends up coming in really handy outside of pan. And it wasn't until I realized that the module did that I was like, oh, this is going to be super useful. And then the VCAs actually have some drive on them, which has been really useful too. I love the Twin Peak filter from Epoch, and it can be a little quiet depending on like the cutoff and resonance settings. So having that little bit of extra gain here helps for things like that. And it also has like a nice crunch to it. So just overdriving it sounds pretty good.
Great. So and you've got the Magneto in there as well. You say
I picked that up recently. I've always been a big Strymon fan, and I have their El Cap pedal, and really love that. So it sort of seemed like, well, I should check it out. And I'm getting along pretty well with it. My my go-to delay has been this Odo BIM over here.
Yeah.
Very different character, but both that kind of like vintage, old school kind of delay sound. But I'm liking it. All the stuff you can do with locking the buffer and then having it follow pitch has been really fun to play with.
Yeah, cool. And what's the case you've got there that's in? Is that a DIY one, or is that
this is the company's called Submodular. I think they're based out of LA. They're somewhere here in California, but I'll just show you, like, it's just ultra thin.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, like,
does it have a lid?
Yeah, it does have a lid, and the lid's big enough that I can patch it like one layer. I don't think I've been able to close it with like 2 stackables stacked, or that felt iffy enough that I didn't, want to squish it.
Yeah,
but
sure.
The lid's tall enough that it'll close flat. And they've been working on like a donut insert, so you could patch or connect 2 cases together. So like the other side of the case becomes, the lid. So I'm tempted by that, but for me, generally, when I perform, like, this is the perfect size.
Right. Yeah. I'm about to go and replace all of my cables with the tendrils ones, the right angled cables, just because when I'm going out and playing live, even though I can close my cases, they tend to put a little bit too much stress on the cables still. So going tendrils all the way. So I've got big replacement. So have you got a second case there as well?
Yeah. So my sort of overflow case is over here. This has a lot of the stuff I've had for a while that I just couldn't sort of bear to part with, or I don't really, need to perform with. And every once in a while, things move back and forth. So I've got not quite the full set of live wire, but all my favorites that weren't really big, and then a couple Metasonics modules, the Folk Tech Matter, the Schwayman Res 4, the VCA 4, which was getting tons of use until I got that Quattro Figaro. Teletype, that's been a lot of fun to learn. And then
yes, that's something I'd definitely like to know more about, the teletype stuff. But
okay, cool. Yeah, I'm happy to go into that too. And then my sort of control skiff that gets used with either this case or the other case It's got a couple pressure points, some really handy, useful utility modules. This is a empirical circuits dual latch, and then some of the Circuit Abbey modules, and of course Tempe, and now Rene 2 is in there.
Ah, Rene 2's made it in. Brilliant. And you're pairing that up with Tempe. Is that a Schweiman VCO6 top left?
Oh, it's close. Good eye, but it's the MMF6. Yeah, that's an
okay.
awesome filter.
Yeah, it's about the same size as VCO6. Cool. Wow, you've got a really good selection there. Yeah, wow. In 2 cases as well. I'm just looking at how you're connecting the 2 cases. You're just using really long cables just to get across.
Yeah, some purple stackables.
Yeah. One of the things that I did recently was, let me just go over to this camera here. One of the things that I've just invested in with these Octalinks over here, which allow me to basically send 8 signals from one case over Ethernet into the second case, which is over here, over to here. And I've been sending audio and CV, and they've been great so far. I'm buying some slightly longer cables though for the 2 because it's a little bit stretched. But yeah, that's basically saved me 16 really long cables between the 2 main cases, which is great. And also going out and playing live, I'm just going to be able to rock up, connect the 2 cases together with 2 Ethernet cables, and fingers crossed it'll all work.
Nice. Yeah, I saw that. I was interested to try it with my sorry about that, my Nord drum, because it has the Ethernet pad.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to get those triggers into the modular. I thought, oh, maybe that would work, but going between cases would be rad too.
Cool, man. Great. Well, thanks again for joining us, James. I'm going to introduce our second guest, who I think we already heard. And this is none other than Ken Pierce, otherwise known as Fluxwithit. Ken, can you hear me? Thanks for joining us. Your mic's muted, I think, still.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't want it to be too annoying. I wanted people to get to see my open rafters and whatnot.
You might as well tell them about your rafters, what you was telling me, what they are.
Oh, yeah. So above me this is actually all wine boxes.
Oh, that's rad.
Well, this it's not. It's all bad. No, the story of why I'm in this setup, like if you've seen my older videos, you would see that I had a pretty nice, like all neon green studio. And now I'm in this prison cell. Basically, Modular forced me to rob a bank, so now I'm in prison. No, I moved last Christmas, and we've been renovating a house. I've got a family and 3 kids and 2 dogs and 2 guinea pigs and all that good stuff. So
yeah,
we needed more room, so we renovated a house that's quite nice. And the side effect of that is that my studio is literally not built yet. So like the walls, everything, like we're building it from scratch. So in the meantime, I am in what used to be a wine cellar in here, and this is my temporary space. So I have everything just kind of thrown in here, and it's kind of ridiculous, but hey, it works for now, and I'm willing to make the sacrifice for the family. So
great,
which is the way that it should be,
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And if you haven't checked out Ken's YouTube channel, it is absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
It's full of, it's not just modular stuff on there. I mean, you've been doing some all sorts of synths and music production related stuff on there.
Yeah, it's a my channel is really just it's just me expressing things that I really love, which generally relates to music. I do a lot of sound design, like sample packs for like Machine and MPC, and I've worked with a lot of different companies doing consultation for their synthesizers, their drum machines, samplers, that sort of thing. And because of that, I grew up kind of just being a really big fan of music, and I never really got too awestruck by the artists. But the people that really awestruck me were the people who were making the samplers and the drum machines and whatnot that the artist could use. Because to me, that's like wizardry. I'm like, how could you be that smart? So when I started getting access to things like NAMM and getting to meet some of my heroes, I said, you know what, I'm going to share these, I want to document these experiences so that other people can meet the people that I'm my heroes, like when I got to interview Dave Rossum, like that was mind blowing to me. Like Dave Rossum, like what? Like I was giddy, and I've met some really fantastic artists, but nobody has made me quite as, butterflies in the stomach is when I meet those kinds of guys. So I just try to, I show tricks and tips and DIY things and, but just a passion for music in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, take us through what you've got in your rack currently then.
Sure. So my rig is kind of spread across, it's spread across 4 modular cases right now, but I'm primarily going to be using 3 right now. 4? Yeah, 4. So let me change my camera. Sorry if I'm getting out of the mic here. Let me oh god, this thing is acting up. Give me 1 second. See if this thing will work. Okay, hold on. This camera is rather silly. Well, maybe if I unplug it, let's see what happens. Okay.
Ken's gone. Ken's decided to leave us.
I'm here.
No, I think he's just unplugged. I think you're just resetting your camera. This is the beauty of live.
Okay.
Stream.
Well, yeah. The Google Hangout thing is acting up on me. It's not letting me select anything. I have a blue icon that's like just floating around inside the window for some reason. I don't know what that's about. It went
on
away.
Our side, you at least have a nice green icon.
Yeah. Well, maybe you'll have to rejoin us.
Yeah. Let me rejoin and I'll get that sorted real quick.
All right. Cool. No worries. Okay. Yeah. In the meantime, I just a quick thing that I've been doing. If I switch over to here, I've just literally spent the past 2 days reworking and reconfiguring my whole entire cases, my 2 cases that I'm using. And I probably spend more time on Modular Grid. If you haven't used that website for planning cases, that's where I spend most of my internet time, definitely. So just a quick rundown of what I've done recently is, so we've got the Her mod over here, which allows me to interface with the computer. That interfaces with Shifty when I want it to. Shifty is really cool for voice allocation. I got the Quadra for some envelopes, which I then use for these 3 Instruo TSLs, which are my polyphony for making chords and things like that, which run into Tangle Quartet, little mixer, and then an overseer for stereo filtering. I've got the 1 Euro with the Steppy in it. I just did a video on that. Brand new module by IntelliGel, and then the mixers up here, the by Bifaco, and then my sample playback using the 1010 Bitbox. In my other case, this is where there's a lot of voices, more voices. So I've got the bass up here, which runs with this Sonic XV. This filter is just amazing. Did a video recently on filters and just A/Bing that against one of the tip top ones, and wow, some distortion that all gets mixed together, runs through a high pass filter, and I actually use a compressor on it as well, just to tame a lot of the low end and things like that. Piston Honda for some stereo craziness. Omnimod for some more crazy envelopes. Got MATTHS down here in Tempe for generating some envelopes, and Zadar or Zadar, I think it's Zadar, for more envelopes. I've got this little crazy junction box here that a friend of mine, Dave Stitch, made, and I'll talk about this in a video coming up, but it allows you to basically choose between 3 different envelopes coming in and kick them out to my filters. And then I got some rings over here, and that's about it. So there's about 4 voices in here, and then over in my other case, this is kind of for mixing, and the polyphony stuff over there as well. So that's where I am with that, and I spent a good amount of time today sort of patching it back up together and what have you. But can't wait to get some of those 10 drills So I can basically get rid of a lot of that spaghetti mayhem that's going on in there. Right, I think, Ken, are you back?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm far away from the mic. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
I had to grab my tea.
Grab your tea. Grab your tea or the whiskey.
I figure the tea is the reason why the screen wasn't working.
There we go. Back in it.
Okay. So, where to start first? This is my rig. Let me see.
Yeah, just a rig run down. What have you got in the cases before we get into some patching?
So the primary setup that I'm going to be using today is, so the right-hand side, this is my drum rig, okay? And the way that I basically have it set up is I use a BeatStep Pro, okay? The top row of the BeatStep Pro sends MIDI, right? It doesn't send CV. So what I've done is I send a MIDI cable out to an anti-module MIDI gate, which is on the right.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just a little, I think it's like 4 HP. It has a DIN socket on it, and then it has 11 gate outputs on it. So I can send all of my top row out, and that goes to the Delptronics Little Drummer Boy 2E. So that's these two modules right here, okay? And all those short patch cables all go to there. The kick drum from that goes into a the shapes from Audio Damage.
Yeah.
So it lets me get a little bit more crunch on the kick drum from that. It's a pretty, the kick drum on the Little Drummer Boy 2 is very, you know, it's just that analog kick drum sound. So I like to send it through something that gives it more crunch. The bottom row is all coming out CV, and that would be, I don't really use the Polaris that's in here. I don't use it too much. I'm finding that it's actually kind of noisy in this system. So I may move that to another place. Audio Damage compressor, which is their Rough Rider plugin in a module form, which is great. Yeah. Oftentimes I'll sidechain that from the Mutant bass drum, which is next. And I have it distorted usually goes to the mix, clean usually goes to a sidechain. After that, I have the Mutant snare. Mutant snare, I use that a ton in my sound design because you can send an input into the noise circuit of it. So you can basically, you can really change how the drum sounds. What I really like to do is I like sending vocal samples into it, and you get these kind of talking drums out of it, which is really fun. After that, we have the Anti-Module Boom Shack, which is, you know, it's just a complex drum voice. It can be really anything that you want. I primarily use it as a kick drum because it's just really punchy and really low and just fantastic. So I use that a lot. And the Audio Damage Neuron, which I honestly use it more as hi-hats than anything, which is kind of like gluttonous because it could do so much more than that. Sometimes I'll use it as like tonal percussion, but I primarily use it for hi-hats because I just really like how it sounds.
Yeah.
The open and close action of that, let me see if I can show you this. This should be fairly quiet, but
yeah,
can you hear that ticking?
Yeah.
So I do open and close. And if you could see, yeah, you can see the lights flashing in the middle row there. That is the Anti-Module triple XOR, triple exclusive OR.
Yeah.
So that's handling logic of open and close hi-hats with one trigger input on that module. Oh. So basically when I select pad 3 here, you're going to get closed hi-hat. When I select pad 4, I can hold it and you're going to get output that's going to open up the VCA on the module and let it ring out longer.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So there's that. Moving over this way. Oh, and of course, Mutant Hot Glue is the mixer for that. And then it runs into Clouds. The important aspect of Clouds is that I run it in Parasites and it's in that delay mode. Just to illustrate what that does. Let me actually take this off of clock input. Speed this up a bit. So with this, my 8th output on the bottom row is my freeze. So I can.
Oh, okay. And that's Parasite's doing that.
Yeah, so that's yeah, and it's in like a delay mode on there. So that one I actually built. I have another factory clouds in my other case that I'll get into. But yeah,
Okay.
that basically always stays in that mode. Sometimes I use a little bit of reverb from it, but primarily I use it for beat glitching. Which it's
Great.
fantastic at that. And if
So
you
is that over like a stereo bus of the drums, or is that just on the hi-hats or the snares or something?
so I don't run my drums in stereo primarily. For a couple of reasons. Usually I'm going mono, and yeah, that's actually straight on the output of my whole drum mix, right? So it goes through that and then out to my modular.
Okay.
I primarily go mono because I do, again, like I do a lot of sound design, and when I'm creating samples, mono is the preferred method of working with drums.
Yeah.
And then if I need to pan, I'll usually do that, after the fact. So unless I'm doing something specific with loops, generally speaking, I'm keeping it mono.
Sure. Yeah.
Now that all comes over into the larger modular rig, and I will be kind of bringing the camera in closer to show what I'm doing with it in a bit. But I am excessive when it comes to mixers. I have a ton of them. I love mixers, and I use them for all manner of purposes. So I have like 7 mixers throughout my system. And yeah, so primarily Levitate from Erogenous Tones and VC8. These two are kind of like my hub. Everything kind of goes in here, and then it gets distributed into whether or not it's going to come to my outputs. Now, oftentimes I'll run from that into the Animodule Mixman, which gives me 3 channels, and I will that it just makes things a little bit less cluttered to deal with. Like I have, 3 larger knobs that, okay, these are all my sub mixes will come into that, and then I can kind of send that off to my final output stage. The setup right now is going to be that I'm using Qubit Scanned, which is their new. It's technically it's a wavetable module, but it's also kind of like a lookup table, I guess. And it's just really interesting. I've been using it primarily in like percussive patches. I've also been using it with the Matrix Brute and getting some really like interesting movement. So that's going to be on my first channel. And then moving down from that, I've got the Ogon accumulator, and I'm just kind of scanning through and blending between the 3 different waveforms on that. If you're not aware of that module, it's basically a complex wavetable module, and it has 3 wavetables running it at the same time, along with a 4th that's a modulator. And you can blend between those in different ways. You can add effects to them. It's just a really, really powerful module with a lot of hands-on control. So I have a blast with that. I believe.
Yeah, I think the Ogon accumulator. That's by Neutron Sound, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Jim is a good friend. He is just a fantastic guy, and he really knocked that thing out of the park. He's been working on a poly version and all kinds of other stuff. So I don't want to put him on blast, but man,
just showing that up on the screen here. Yeah, I've never used one of these, but they looks like there's a lot of modulation.
Yeah, and those control CVs actually cascade. So if you have one CV input on there, you can, the other attenuators over there, attenuverters will still, it'll cascade it down until you plug into the other ones.
Okay.
So it's really powerful to get a lot of modulation out of a single source on that thing. The wave CV at the bottom will step through the different waveforms that are inside of it.
Right.
Which is great because you can you can really mangle sound with this thing. And the other thing is, if you look to the far right-hand side, you'll see, so there's CX, FM, and then fix. Well, above that fix button is a drum. You can put this thing into a drum mode, and it is a fantastic drum module. So a lot of people don't really realize that thing, the drum mode on this thing is fantastic.
And this does this also do chords as well?
Yes, yeah. So you can do I believe it is, if I'm recalling correctly, it's C. So right next to the FX select button, you'll see the three notes.
Yeah.
It will allow you to pitch the oscillators into different intervals, which is great.
Great.
Yeah, really big sound, and it does like detuned spreading, so you can do like clouds and that kind of thing out of it. It's just it's a kick-ass module. And if you look at my rig, let me see if I can point this out. Yeah. So the one with all the ridiculously colored knobs, because I have
I was going to ask about
I'm
this
not a
one.
graphic designer. This is the DIY version of it as well. Now the DIY differs in that one, it's through hole. Which is great for those of us that, do DIY stuff and enjoy through hole, the difficult aspect of this one is that it does not have as many buttons on it as the retail version. So the retail version, you can just select things and there's, icons like I just showed you for everything. Whereas on the DIY, and this is an early panel, so the newer panel has a little bit more information on it. You have to kind of know what you're pressing to get to the different modes and whatnot. It's a little bit more archaic, but it's nowhere near as bad as a disting. So,
sure.
And I love expert sleepers, but good Lord, the early distings were, oh man, trying to read that Predator code is impossible.
That got me a while. When I actually bumped into him at a trade show once, I said, I'm sorry, I don't quite get how to change from banks to presets. Anyway, he's very kind and he helped me with that. Actually, Paul in the chat room's just been asked, just going back to your mixers there, Ken.
Yes.
So he's asking, are you using the mixers like for stemming essentially?
Yes. Yeah. So I use them for a few different things. One, the way my modular is set up, I don't think you can see it. No, you can't. I'll adjust it. So there's another row. Which, by the way, this beautiful case is by Ethereal Sun. So primarily if you're in the States, these types of bigger cases, I don't know what shipping would be like to the UK. Just like Ross Lamond, like I love the guy, but shipping to the US is a little bit hectic. But anyway, so this case is a custom case that I actually kind of told him what I wanted, and we worked through it together to come up with it. It's got the custom neon green rails and all that stuff. It's pretty awesome. So he can kind of do whatever you want. But this top row it's changed in the last week, but primarily I try to keep it analog oscillators up top. But I have a phone and Gene up here in an envelope. Like it kind of got a little cluttered this past week. But the second row, this is mostly digital oscillators. And then this mixer on the end here is what I'm getting at. Basically, I'll send my sound sources into the Animodule mixer, and then it has these push button. You can turn on the channels with push buttons on here, and you can also sequence them with CV, right? So if I send like if I were to send a CV into this thing that's running, like a sequencer into it, like so, you'll see that they'll start to step. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Yeah, you can see it stepping. So these guys are all flashing in different combinations. So oftentimes I'll send oscillators into that and then out to the filters. And this will let me kind of like randomly change sound sources and do sort of interesting things like that. So I'll use a mixer there. Then I have another mixer down here, which is, also a ring modulator. This is from Vermona, the Quadrupole.
Yeah.
It has a fantastic ring mod in it. And it's just a really nice, their modules are built fantastically. Really high build quality. So that I'll tend to blend. The filter outs will kind of go to there. And then from there, I can step down into like the VC8 and do that sort of thing and separate out from there. So a lot of times it's stemming, and then depending on the patch, it may also be just simply me wanting to break out different sections so that I can be a little bit more flexible with how I'm working.
So do you then use a multiple or something like that to record stuff into the computer if you just want a particular sound, like a kick drum or I don't know, a delayed?
It depends on It depends on the project,
Yeah.
because sometimes modular noise levels can get kind of high for my taste, like
Right.
noise floor.
Yeah.
So it really depends on exactly what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll completely take a module out of the larger case. Like if I really want something pristine, I may take just the choice modules of that patch and put them in their own case on their own power and have it completely separate and isolated so that I know that I'm not getting any kind of weird noise
Yeah.
from anything else. For the most part, my noise levels are really low. But you know, if I'm using the drum stuff and let's say I bring in the compressor, well, that's raising the noise floor. And then I have,
Yeah.
you know, other issues there. So it really, really depends on what I'm doing. If I'm working in loops, then yeah,
Yeah.
more likely what I'll do is I'll send I may be two tracking the loop, which generally when I say two tracking, I don't even mean stereo. A lot of times what I'll be doing is I'll send a mono out and then I'll send like a the effects send out
Yeah.
separately.
You got those
And
separate.
yeah, and that's a mono
Yeah.
effect send that I'm doing that with. So I'll have kind of like two different mixes so then I can go back and I can look at them and be like, okay, well, I kind of like this aspect or that aspect, but I didn't like this aspect, and I can kind of toy with it and decide exactly what I want.
And just
Um,
mess with it
yeah,
in post. And actually, James, just quickly asking you on this one. When you're recording stuff into the computer, what's your front end that you're recording into? And are you just recording a stereo mix generally, or are you stemming stuff out?
No, I'm usually doing a stereo mix just because the more I sort of think about the process of recording, the more I overthink it, and then I just either don't get anything done or I just get frustrated.
Yeah.
So for me, the easiest is just track what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And it kind of depends where I am or sort of what I've been doing. If I just need to record something right away. And of course, now I can't find it, but I have a Zoom H6.
Yeah.
So I usually just come out of the Mackie, which mixes both cases and the two Odo outboard things together,
Yeah.
and then I'll go into the H6. Otherwise, if it's like I'm going to sit down and record and everything's planned out, I have my sort of ultimate UA 2-channel signal chain. Their old 2192 converter, and then I'll usually go into that through either the 2610 or 2LA2A, or maybe just one of those. Since this will take line signal just fine, this would just kind of add some character to the line signal, and then into the Apollo.
Right. Wow, that's a really nice chain, and so that's basically on the stereo master, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really
the
nice
Zoom
chain.
idea with that is great. Like I keep one of those as well, just for like, you know, you can capture stuff on the fly so fast. It's really nice to have just a handy field recorder next to you at all times. Like I keep one in the car. Like I don't go anywhere without my Zoom recorder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, they boot up quick. Like especially that H6 has so many different input and output options. On my Jim Drones recording project, all three of those albums were actually done with either the Zoom H6 or a really old Roland R9 portable recorder. I never actually used all that awesome 2-channel stuff, just because a lot of those pieces were recorded where either I didn't have this rack nearby or out, and I just was playing around and had something cool, and well, I'm just gonna go. In fact, some of those were straight out of the modular. I was using the Herb Verb for reverb, and that was in the rack, and I just went straight out of the modular into the portable recorder. Yeah. So it really is just like whatever I have on hand, because that's what's going to capture.
Now, do you process a lot of the stuff, your computer stuff, back through the modular?
Not so much with my own music. I've definitely worked on like friends projects where we've done that a lot, either using filters or the Piston Honda, using that for like a wavetable distortion, sending bass stuff through wave folders and things like that. For a while, I've been trying to do stuff with like Oscillator Sync on a couple of friends' projects where we're trying to like replace that sound with something synthesized using like sync and FM, and it usually ends up too wild for a couple of the people's tastes, but I'm still trying to
I run into that. I run into that a lot, where it's like you have this idea and you're like, okay, especially when it comes to like FM and sync and that sort of stuff. And you're like, man, this is gonna be wild. And then you play it back and you're like, okay, it's really wild. It needs to be way more calm.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, it's like, it sounds rad, and then they unsolo it, and then like, oh yeah, this is not going to fit in with the rest of their mix. I just took their like nice tight in the pocket bass line and, you know, made the whole thing sound like a Nine Inch Nails track, and then they just tried to put it back in with everything else. Like, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah. And that's kind of like primarily a large aspect of my rig, because it always comes back to sound design. And even before sound design, like I produce a lot of hip hop, so I treat my modular like I do my turntables. Like it's a sampling source. So like a lot of guys want to you know, and I'm not knocking it by any means, but a lot of guys want to do things like modular on the spot, where it's all modular, and if it's outside of the case, that's not cool. And I'm kind of the exact opposite of that, where I'm like, you know what? I want to use my modular as an element to a lot of other stuff, you know? So like I'll, you know, I can even create loops and tracks in the modular, but then I'm still going to sample that up and then chop it up and do things. And then I may send those sources back through, because let's say, for instance, I love the Thriller VCF. And when you get that thing really driving hard, it sounds like nothing else. So I might just, you know, I may do a few things, or like, even if I'm not a analog snob by any means. So like I'll use, say, Massive, or I'll use, you know, Absinthe, or, you know, any VST, and then send it through an analog filter on the output and kind of overdrive that, and then back into the computer. So I try to keep things flexible with that as well.
I think you know, I think that's a really good approach to have, Ken. I think some people can be a little bit too much. I only use modular. I only use a guitar. I only use software. If you can combine all of those worlds together when you're making music, I think it opens up so much more for you. And it's so easy to get signals in and out of computers these days, and sending stuff out of Ableton, you know, drum loops or whatever, through some distortion, or I don't know, clouds or something like that. It's so simple. Record that back in, tweaking around with it. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I record are essentially jams and tweaking and playing with stuff in real time. And then I go back in, and then I can choose bits that I want to keep, rearrange and edit. And it's a fun process to do it that way, rather than just clicking with a mouse and trying to pull sounds out of plugins and that kind of stuff. I think
there's certainly there's a beautiful art to staying modular. Like I just want to be clear, I am not knocking that in any way, shape, or form. It's just not my primary workflow, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that going back to my current rig, is I've had to think a lot about how I can use this in the studio, and how I can go out and play live with this. So it's designed in a way that it can stay patched, and it's very, very flexible. And when I go out and play live, it's all ready to go. I don't have to move modules around. And oh God, I used to do that in the past, and the amount of modules that I've accidentally fried just unplugging stuff, you know. The fact that I could just leave it all patched now is just leaves me feeling a little bit better about all of that. Anyway, look, there's a really interesting conversation. We can go on more about that. Let's jump into a little bit of patching. Let's start making some sound. Let's go straight over to you, James.
Okay.
Have you got something you want to share with us? Show us, talk us through.
I've got 3. I'm just sort of thinking what I'll start with. I think maybe I'll start with this one. So I don't know what like the proper name for these are. I always call them combo pots, but like the Optimix has them where, let's see if I got, okay, cool. Where, you know, this works as a control until you patch in to the input jack, and now it functions as an attenuator. And the way those work internally is there's some positive voltage offset that's connected to this jack until you patch a cable in. So what this is really doing is, you know, attenuating a positive invisible signal that's connected in there. And then once you patch a cable in, it's just going to take whatever that voltage in, which is super handy, but you kind of also lose the controller, or the offset, I guess, once you patch in. And since the Optimixes are kind of like my main mixers, if you want to call them that, when I play live. Sometimes I want to just turn that knob like it's a control, and other times I want an envelope to be hitting that. So a little trick I use is just with a passive switch. I have a couple of these toggles from Noise Reap, or even found like online. There's these pretty cheap little passive boxes. They usually sell them as iPod AB switches. So they're stereo, but if you just patch a mono patch cable in, it works fine. So it's basically the same kind of config. You've got, input, output, or whatever, and your A connection and your B connection. So what I have going here is.
So James, just to confirm, the way you use the Optimix is essentially as your VCA and a filter, kind of, in a way.
Yeah, right? The thing I really love about low pass gates is it's a filter and a VCA together, and to me that sounds very like organic in how a physical instrument would be.
Yeah.
The harder you hit it, the brighter it's going to sound. The softer you hit, it's sort of duller. And I just find when I'm mixing voices together, I usually don't have to control the low end that much. They're usually in key sort of with each other. So that rolling off the high end just sounds good to me. So yeah, usually each one of these is controlling a voice. And again, because of the sort of reason for this trick is I'm usually either manually modulating one of these, or I'm using an envelope to open it up. So what I'll do is with one of these switches is the center pole or the output will go into the Optimix in, and here, so long as everything powered back on. Oh, that's why. Let's turn the delay down.
Is that the magneto delay?
That I think was actually the Odo.
Yeah,
because this wet was already. I started at the beginning. I was like, let me make sure wet's all the way down, but I didn't look at the Mackie. Okay, so here we should have. Not sure why it got so quiet.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's working. So on the lower switch, I have just a regular channel of MATTHS here.
And MATTHS is generating envelopes there, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And then on the top, I'm actually taking the OR output of MATTHS, but usually it'll just be one offset. So now I can turn this like I normally would turn the Optimix control knob. When the switch is up and when the switch is down, I've got my envelope. So I can kind of dynamically, if I want, use it as a mute. And then now I can control with the offset and do sort of manual swelling.
Okay.
Or because I'm using MATTHS here, I could actually use that switch as like an alternate envelope. So if I wanted to set up something that kind of sounded like a roll. And do little tricks like that.
Great. So you're almost generating trills when you need it, or just being able to just jump from one envelope shape to a different envelope shape is just great for live, like say for live performance.
Yeah, exactly. That trick's also kind of useful with, say like non-sound modules that use combo pots. Like I'll use it off the same kind of trick often with the Tempi with its CV state selection.
Yeah.
So same kind of deal. I'll just turn the control in the Tempi all the way up, patch a signal in there through that switch. One end of the switch will be set at an offset for like a state on Tempi where I have all the gates muted or something. And then the other switch becomes, either the thing that's modulating it or sequencing it, or another manual offset. So at the drop of a hat, I can flip the switch and the Tempi state will go to a very specific one that I've got set up as either like, mute everything, or maybe a very specific state I know I'm always going to come back to, like a 4 on the floor or something like that.
Which you always need when you're playing live. You always need that kind of get out of jail card. and get back to your four on the floor whenever you need it after you've just sort of mangled stuff up. So I think that's a really good trick to have.
Yeah, the like I said, the key to this is, you know, the little manual toggle switch, and I'm not sure who makes. I mean, anyone who's DIY inclined could easily make them because they're just passive.
Right.
But also, you know, if you don't have space in your case, or even you just want to play around with the idea, there's a whole bunch of companies, at least on Amazon or whatever, that are making these little AB switch boxes. Probably if you Google iPod AB switch, you'll find them.
Can I show you something?
Yeah, jump in there, Ken.
So to that same point about the DIY on that, I actually built one, and it was like one of the very first things I did when I got my first modular case. And I stuck it with Velcro to the side of the case.
Yeah, that's what I was planning to do with these little guys.
So let me see if I can kind of bring this in a little bit so you guys can see it. So right here, I don't know if you guys can see that.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me bring it in a bit. Go America. There we go. All right. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right here. There we go. So what it is I have a 1/4 inch input on this one. All right, because it's all just point to point wiring. Like, it's very easy to figure out.
Right.
And then these are all molted together. Then there's a switch, so it says only. All right. So if I have the switch up, it's just this is molted together. If I switch it down, it becomes all of these molted together. Right?
Ah, okay.
And then I have the same thing over here, except I didn't do a 1/4 inch on that side, which I regret. I should have put 2 1/4 inches, but I just don't think I had them. But it's super useful for, like, if I want to send line gear into my modular, I can go right there. Or if I'm sending out to something that needs 1/4 inch, like, I can use it as a format, you know, jumbler like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's 2 molts in there, or it's 4, depending on how I have the switches, you know? So, and it's just a plastic case that I got from, like, Radio Shack. And then I just hand drilled it and screwed them in there. And then I did point to point wiring inside of it, and took some industrial Velcro and stuck it to the side of the case. And it's out of the way, doesn't take up any power, doesn't take up any rack space, and it's super useful.
Yeah, totally. Great.
I think all these kind of extra gadgets you guys, and I see a lot of producers have in their studios, just to get sounds in and out, or in addition to the usual modules, you know, you need these kind of things. Who is it just said it? Inky in the chat room said Velcro next to gaffer tape is the only non-musical devices in the studio that you need. So yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Nice little device there. James, just while we're with you, is there anything else you want to show us?
Yeah, let me show you. It's another sort of live performance trick.
Okay.
And I usually use this with, we have to crank the gain a little bit on this one. If you guys can hear that, maybe it doesn't have as much bass. So I'll use this trick a lot with pinged filters, like sending gates and triggers to a filter to create this sound, which is what I'm doing. But it would, in theory, work using the clocks to drive sequencers and stuff too.
Okay.
The gist of what it is using a crossfader on like 2 clock signals. I'm using the twin peak filter here, which has 2 inputs and a crossfader built in. So you could use a separate crossfader module, or like if the module itself has a fade or a mix between 2 inputs. That's what I'm using. And what we're listening to is there's 2 different, there we go. Here and here, there's 2 different gate patterns. So right now, I think we're listening to this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just simply coming out of the mono Ansible and patched into 1 input. And then the other gate pattern is coming out of channel 2 and patched into the other input. So what you can do is have 1 rhythm and then just very quickly crossfade over to another one. And that, in a way, is kind of doing something similar to what we did with the switch. But the cool thing is you can, layer the different ones in between.
That was going to be my question. What happens when the dial is right you know, in the middle? Does it kind of fade one in and fade one out, or does it?
Yeah, essentially we're hearing them both together at probably like, you know, a little bit attenuated.
Yeah.
But if you start to put two steps together, it'll actually act kind of like an accent because it'll be extra loud on that, that step. So yeah, that just kind of becomes an interesting way to get an evolving rhythm that's sort of manually under your control and subtle variations. And I usually like to run that through some kind of wave shaper.
That sounds awesome.
And then the rhythms start to get a little more interesting as you crossfade between them. But I'll use that live pretty often, just to have that much more sort of control and variation, sort of at ready with my hands. So I'm not like having to remember what sequence I had or what was going to get me to that other place in the piece or whatever. It's there and it's like fully under my my control.
And what's great is that you're pairing it with the monome, so you're actually able to see visually what the gate sequences are. So you can see that even before you flick over and start introducing that second pattern. So you can get an idea of what it's going to sound like before you start bringing that second one in, I guess, because monome is very visual.
Yeah, exactly. But again, this would technically work with anything. It was a little easier to patch this because it was here instead of R2, and I'm actually using Rene 2 for the third patch example. But this is a trick I used to do with grids too, as well as tempi. Really, you just kind of need two trigger sequences or just patterns. It could even be random bursts going into that crossfader and then into the filter. But again, you could also try this with, you know, clocking a sequencer too. You might get, you know, more or sort of less predictable results when the crossfader is like at 50%. Because if two adjacent ones overlap, the sequencer might not see the voltage drop all the way to 0 and then back up and recognize that as the next step. But if you're using really short triggers, which these happen to be, that shouldn't be a problem. Because the trigger length will probably be so short, it'll probably be like, you know, a 30-second note or something if you were to translate it into like a musical time, that they wouldn't be two adjacent 30-second notes would be the only time it would get a little weird.
Okay.
So that's one way you could take this instead of being sound generation and make it into like clocking sequencers or drum modules or things like that.
So could you make the gate length larger on the monome? Would that generate the longer gate length for you?
Yes, actually. I never actually do it. This is running right now the Kriya sequencer app. And I think it's like this. There's 4 menus that you can choose. One is the trigger pattern. The next one is the note pitch. I have like a predefined scale in here. The third one is the octave range for each note. And then the last one is the gate duration. So in theory, I think if we did this, oh, that's the wrong track. Yeah, okay. If you guys are able to pick that up with that.
Yeah.
I always wanted a monone. That kind of makes me jealous.
You know, I had one of the original ones a long time ago and used it with Max, and it was like too sort of generic of an interface. I just was constantly lost, or I would spend like entire weekends programming up ideas, and then when it would be done, I'd be like, oh, this actually isn't that great. It's kind of boring. I just wasted a whole weekend. And it wasn't until I learned more about this Kriya sequencer that I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll give that a shot. And the fact that the app that lives in the Ansible that runs on here is kind of already made, and you just have to see if it's going to work for you. That helps me out a lot. It's not just me trying to customize my own stuff and do that for weekends.
I think they're based not far from me too. Like they're based out of Philly, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, or like I think upstate New York somewhere.
Yeah,
yeah. Or
so one of these days I'm gonna get one of those things. What's the
I've been saying the same thing
that's
too.
like 4 knobs. It's like 4 silver knobs. Do you know what I'm talking about? It has a similar aesthetic to that, but it's just 4 large silver knobs.
Oh yeah, the dials, the 4 rotary dials. That
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the arc.
Arc. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that one was pretty high on my list. And I thought I would try this one. They actually had like a B stock or blemish. I don't even know where it's blemished on the grid, and that's when I picked it up. The Ansible module is pretty cool too. If you hook up the grid, it'll run the 2 to 3 apps that work on grid. If you hook up the arcs, the 4 knobs, it has 2, I think, different apps for that. Yeah. But it also will work as like a 4-channel MIDI to CV converter, like class compliant USB. And there's like a fourth mode. Oh, it can be an expander for the teletype if you hook up some pins in the back. I haven't actually tried that, but it can do that too. So I've been having a lot of fun with that one. When I was beta testing Renee, I was kind of like hopping between the two and not necessarily comparing features, but seeing how the different types of sequences and stuff I would make, and see if I could think of ways to make Renee 2 faster or easier to use or more immediate and things like that.
Yeah, Monome's one of those places I haven't been to yet. I mean, I've used Max and things like that quite a lot in the past, but certainly haven't used Monome. Just one thing on that, James.
Yeah.
Sorry if you stop your sequence a second, but
oh yeah.
So you mentioned Tempe, because you can kind of get away with doing similar things on Tempe in that you can. I mean, I've got things going on here, so I've got, I think, channel 1 and 2 are modulating against each other, so they swap over every now and then. But you can also manually turn that on and off, which is pretty good. So it's actually one of the reasons why I went for Tempe over Pamela's workout. Was the possibility to mute things and to tap stuff in real time on the Tempe. I thought was really great for live performance. So yeah, you mentioned you'd had a go at already kind of doing this already on the Tempe, had you?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, the reason I didn't use Tempe for this one, other than it being, further away, was I have a third patch set up where I'm using that. But yeah, for me too, the huge thing with Tempe, particularly with live performance, is being able to not only mute and unmute, but to be able to just tap timing changes in like that. I mean, I very rarely do I use the multiply divide kind of button press unless it's something I know I either can't tap accurately enough or really it's like fast enough.
Yeah.
Like trying to tap a 30-second note accurately is not easy to do, just period. Not necessarily because it's Tempe, just because it's not easy to do. It does have a great, there's like 3 levels of input quantization. So if you always want, would it be like an integer value, 1, 2, 3, 4, like nothing 1.5 or anything like that. You can set it to be fully quantized, and then it's pretty easy to get different values in. But yeah, to be able to just mute channels, or one of my favorite tricks is, and it's sort of side effect of like how the menus work. If you're in the mute or the shift menu, it holds it on that state, even if there's CV or something else changing the states. So you can kind of use it as a way to queue up something, change the state, and then as soon as you leave the menu, it would jump to the other state. So that was always like a really useful live trick for me. But yeah, Tempe for me is, it's been sort of hard trying to imagine a live setup without that. Which is why I kind of put everything in this skiff. So it's easy to put this skiff.
Have they been releasing a lot of updates for that? Because I remember when it first came out, there was like I don't know if it was confusion or what about some of the things that people wanted it to do versus what it was doing or whatever. And I don't know. I don't have one and I haven't used one. So
yeah, I want to say the first big update after it shipped brought the ability to change those gates, because originally they were just 50% duty cycle gates that came out. You could change it to 75%, 25, and then like just a very short 10 millisecond trigger.
Okay.
And then they added, I think in that same update, the ability to make channel 1 be like a tap tempo. So normally you plug a gate or some kind of stream, clock stream into the tempo input, and it'll just chase that and lock to it. Or kind of just two taps of anything, really. It just needs 2 consecutive triggers. So, you know, if you wanted to tap a tempo, you had to plug, say, pressure points into the tempo input and tap on the pressure points. So that first firmware update added the ability to set channel 1 to where you could just tap channel 1, and that sets the tempo for all the channels. And then there was a pretty big update just recently, which brought some functionality when you hook it up with Rene 2. And then they just had another update where you can now set the state control to rather than change states, it can now be the speed, the tempo.
Oh, okay.
So that was really cool.
That's cool. I didn't know about all those updates actually. I've had mine a while. I think I've updated it once, so I must get updating.
Yeah,
so
always good to ask about updates on digital modules.
Is really awesome.
Sorry, say that again, James.
Oh, the integration with Rene 2 is particularly awesome. The fact that changes in state of Rene 2 will now change state on the tempi. So for every sequence you have in R2, you can have a tempi state that's associated with it. So it's always changing clock with the sequencer state. There was a feature that I was able to, I guess, convince Tony was a good idea. I hope people really like it. It's called mesh, or they ended up calling it mesh programming, where you can set it up so changes from one state will push to other states that are mesh enabled. So the sort of issue I was always having was I'd set up a cool sequence on the x-axis, and then I'd paste that to all the other states, be like, cool, here's my baseline. I know I want this everywhere. And then I'd start to program something on the y-axis of one sequence and go, oh, this is cool, and I want to put it other places, but I don't want to like paste over everything. I might overwrite stuff. So that's where mesh comes in. You could enable mesh on those states and just change one step on just the Y sequence, for example, and that change will go to all the other states. And if tempi's involved, that same thing can happen with tempi. And for me, that's been huge, because kind of going back to what we mentioned earlier, you always want to get back to that, like, 4 on the floor or some kind of consistent thing. If your kick drum is patched to one of these tempi channels now, and you have mesh enabled on Rene 2, mesh gets enabled on tempi as well. So you could, for example, tap a 4 on the floor on channel 1, and that pushes to all the other tempi states. So if you wanted, like, all right, I just want my kick drum to be 4 on the floor all over the place now, and be able to modulate states and have everything else change, you can do that with that mesh programming.
Awesome. Great. Nice one, man. Thanks for all of that. That's cool. Let's jump over into Ken's layer in the wine cellar there.
My dirty prison.
So
I'll touch on a couple of quick things before I jump into the patch.
Sure.
Because I didn't show this case at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
And so the case at the bottom is really the hub right now, which is ES8, which I'm not using. The ER301 sound computer, which is tied with the Fluxus One. Zeta-Ohm Fluxus One is the center hub to pretty much everything in here right now. Warmstar Audio, the Benz, which is we'll get into a little bit of that, but basically it's a Vactrol mixer and voltage offset, and just awesome. I'm primarily using it right now so that I can use the offset knobs to control functions on the 301 computer. The 301, also my drum channel from the 301 goes through an anamodule tranamodule, which is it's technically it's a 3-channel mixer but it also has a speaker output, and it has an actual speaker output, meaning you can get the loaded sound of the speaker coming out from a dedicated output to where you get that overdrive crunch from that speaker, which sounds fantastic. It's one of the coolest distortions of anything that I have. It just sounds awesome. So I like to run like drum samples and whatnot through that and get this extra crunch on it by doing that.
Can you get the sound of that speaker coming out as a line output, or do you mean you've got to record the actual physical speaker to get that sound?
No. So it's you can do that, which also sounds really cool because the speaker itself actually sounds really cool when you put a if you put like a small diaphragm condenser right up on it, you get a really deep sound out of it, which is pretty cool. But no, it has a dedicated speaker output that comes out that's modular level, and it is man, it's pretty kick-ass. I'll show you.
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen so people can just see this at home.
Yeah. The just a small note about the Animodule stuff. So like all his stuff has this kind of punk rock aesthetic to it, which I personally love. And Jesse is actually local to me, so I've worked with him on a few different projects. But the panels and everything are really they all kind of have this punk aesthetic to them, and the early ones were all from street signs that he cut. He cut them down, and yeah. So
wow.
if you get an early module, like they're from street signs, which is awesome. Like I just love that about it. It's a very, very cool module. And if like I actually have 3 of them throughout my system. If you have any portable rigs, like you'll see the I have the Mini Brute 2 over here with the 2-row rack brute. I keep a Trana module in that, and I have another Mini Brute as well with this rack brute case here. So anytime like I'm doing something portable, I have a Trana module in there because it's got a speaker on it, which is pretty awesome. So I'll just get into the patch. Is that cool?
Yeah, go for it.
Mine
is
going to be far less musical and chill. So so please don't hate me. So I'm going to kind of go through the Fluxus 1 allows you to do direct mutings of channels on here. So I'm going to hit play and we'll see what we're getting.
Does your camera get any closer?
Oh yeah. Let me do that. Let me try to not be ridiculous.
I'm going to find that Fluxus 1 it's called, is it?
Yes, yeah. So we're going to get right up on this bad boy. See if how this does.
I can find the Fluxus Duo, but that's a video glitch.
Look for Zeta Ohm, and it's FLXS1.
Okay.
And no, it's just a happy coincidence that it's Flux.
It's that one. I see. It's the
one that looks like Jolly Rancher candies.
Yeah, it's the one.
And there's a lot of advantages to that button layout as well. Those silicone buttons, you can even do like some kind of mild finger drumming and stuff with it, the way that it's set up. So because one of the updates is that you can actually, when you press on a note, it will send the gate out and the pitch out of that note, which is great. You can also mute that so that it doesn't do that, but it's super useful. He did a video. I don't know if it's linked on his page or what. I know it's on his YouTube, but he did a video fairly recently for a large update that he did, and he went through like every feature on it. It's like a 45-minute video, but it's really well done. So if people are interested in that, it's definitely like a direct competitor to something like the Eloquencer and that sort of thing. It's kind of like a higher level.
Yeah, I know Tenkai. He's a Bay Area guy, and his sort of thing was to try and put the Circlon, or actually beat the Circlon in terms of usability, functionality, and just make it into a module. And
it's still he's still doing a ton of updates for it. Like it's still he's still adding so much more to it. So definitely worth checking out. So I'm gonna let me mute this. So this is gonna be qubit scanned. And I just want to adjust it. So this is scanned going through a ring. I'm sorry, a spring reverb from Music Thing Modular, and then from there it goes into clouds. So I'm getting these kind of trail offs in the pitch. And I'm going to bring in the Ogon accumulator now. Now the Ogon accumulator is going back into the ER301, which is where it's getting some reverb, and it's getting some what else? An ensemble and a Doppler delay. So what's great about this module is that basically the ER301 can be anything that you want it to be, and then the modulation inside of it is infinite. So now we'll bring in the drums.
So how did you pitch the drums up?
Okay, so let me just stop the patch for a second.
That sounded great.
So
yeah, I'd also like to know about the notes, and because they sounded like they were semi probability or something.
Yeah. So I'm doing a few different things, and I should also sort of apologize because I was very busy, and I kind of made the patch up in the middle of the night last night at like midnight.
Sounds great.
But so basically what's happening here is the Fluxus One is really cool in that per step you can do arpeggiations, and you can have those arpeggiations be any sort of division that you want.
Nice.
And they can go in any direction that you want. So they can be random, they can be up and down, they can be up, down, they can be up, down, 1, 2. Like, you know, you have lots of flexibility on that. So again, I'm gonna mute this stuff, and I'm gonna show you why I'm a fraud. So basically what I do is on the Fluxus One, let me see how well you can see this. You can't see it well at all. Let me adjust this. Sorry. Because I really do want people to be aware of this, because I feel like this module is heavily slept on, which is a shame. So yeah, this is a little bit better view, right? You can almost read it, but not. All right, hold on. Let's see. Yeah,
that's good.
Close enough. Close enough for now. And so anyway, as I'm stepping through this module, when I press the channel, I get different options. So I'll just read what this is real quick. So this is the scanned module from Qubit, right? And it gives me, first step count. So how long is the sequence? Clock division, which the clock division on this one is 2, which is why the scanned is coming in so slow on, comparative to the drums and whatnot. Direction is forward, swing is at 50%. Now, if I scroll down, I can go into the quantizer of this lane. And what I have it is semitone, key is in C, and it's pentatonic minor. Now, what's really awesome about that is, so I can set the scale for each one of these tracks. And then you have modulation ability in here. So you can do skip 4, which is sort of like, kind of like the Renee in a way, how you have XY sequencing, except with this, you're skipping rows. So, I can send a modulation destination either from inside of the Fluxus One or an external source, and it will skip a step. It'll skip 4 steps so that I can go up and down. Then you also have random patching, so you can modulate that. You have transposing, so you can modulate your transpose, modulate your glide time. You can modulate the ARP type, ARP speed, ARP octave, ARP interval, which is a really, really cool one. So you get all that, and then also per step, not only do you have the option of doing the arpeggiations, but you can also dictate the gate type. So the gate length is on here right now. I have like, for instance, this gate right here, it's an A#1 and gate is at 1.5. So it will go for a step and a half of that step. So it'll actually overlap, which is really dope.
Wow.
Then you can set the type, which right now it's just a typical gate on. But I can change that to be a tie, a one hit, hold, half, and then I can get into the randoms. You have random 33%, random 50%, random 66%. And that's where you get into these kind of like, you know, is it going to hit? Is it not? And then that combined with the arpeggiations gets really, really powerful. And then, of course, glide for that step. The arpeggiation area, you really can get some interesting stuff out of it. Now, the ARPs that I'm using, I'm not just using for melody. So if you set the division of the sequence to be really low, like 2 instead of a quarter note, you know, which most sequences would be usually like a quarter note, this is set to 2. And then I can set my arpeggiations much faster. So you get these steps that are kind of
brilliant. So
like,
you're playing with different divisions and different arpeggiation per step, and yeah, wow, I could just imagine how musical that could end up sounding.
So the way that ties into the drums, though, because this is also what's sequencing the drums. Now, the drums it's a drum loop that I've sliced inside of the 301. And I just want to show that real quick because this thing is amazing. I literally just got this thing like last week, and I'm super in love. So this is the drum waveform here, and you can see there's all these lines all through it, and that's the slice points, right? So those slice points let me select with CV. So I'm selecting, let me turn the reverb down, sorry.
That's awesome. I had a feeling that might be what it was, like watching the sequencer go, like selecting the chopped up slices. That's super cool.
It's so ridiculously dope. I can't express how much I've been waiting for a module that does this and does it well. Like I have a Phonogene, which I kind of do something similar with the Phonogene, but with this, it's like so much more control and, you know, obviously a totally different price point and, you know, and whatnot, but man, you could do some really amazing stuff with this. So the arpeggiations, because they can be different divisions, I can use them as ratchets, right? So per step I'm ratcheting, but not only ratcheting, because I'm selecting the slice by CV, if I set the step to be a unison arp, right, it'll just be a straight ratchet of that same slice, right? But if I set it to, let's say I set it to a major 7th, right, it's going to ratchet and go through a period of slices. So you get this, you can kind of see it stepping through here. Try to move these out of the way. So if you look, can you see the playhead moving through there?
Yeah, just about, yeah.
So watch this. Just as an example, I'm going to turn this first step. I'm going to turn the ARP on it, and I'll play with the... So check this out. So it's like instant Aphex Twin type stuff, you know? Super amazingly awesome. And it just, oh my God, I love it so much.
Yeah, I think that they are actually a really nice pair, that Fluxus.
Yeah. And what's great about it is the 301 is technically it's 4 lanes. And of course, inside of it, you can add mixers and you can make it more lanes than that. You can condense lanes from the other lanes into one. But the Fluxus One is also 4 lanes. And you also have individual, so you have gate, CV1, and CV2 for each channel. And the CV2 is really crazy because it can be a per step envelope, per step LFO. It can be per step voltage, per step triggers, all kinds of different stuff. And they're tempo synced. So you can be sending it like, man, it's just, the pairing is really, really fantastic.
That's 10 CV and 10 gate outputs plus.
Yeah. Plus you
clock
have
and MIDI.
4 gate ins and 4 CV ins as well.
That's
clock.
crazy. Yeah, that's
plus MIDI.
That is a lot of. That's a lot of outputs. I mean, when I looked at that first, I thought this is going to take up. It's taken up quite a lot of HP in terms of size in the rack, but actually that's cramming a lot in there. And
it's insanity how much that module can do. And which is why I'm always like, man, why are people like not more aware of this thing? Like, and then there's things like you can do multi selects on it, and you can save everything. You can do tap tempos. Like you can do song chaining on it. It's a legit, super advanced, powerful sequencer. One last thing about those ARPs is you can adjust how far the octave spread is on the ARPs. So when you're doing those, major, minor, augmented, all that kind of good stuff. I just want to show how that sounds like. So I'll set this to a third, and it'll allow me to step through, and you can find like all these crazy happy accidents. And then of course that interval is modulatable, and so is the octave amount. So like when you're doing that, you can come up with crazy happy accidents with it.
And in terms of inputs on that module, I'm just looking at it. So you've basically got the MIDI input, and that's how you would modulate things internally using external sources.
So it has DIN MIDI on it, right? Via the same type of connectors that the Korg SQ1 has and the Moleco stuff.
Oh, and it's got 4 CV and gate input. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and it can modulate from its own internal sources. So you remember how I said you have these per step LFOs and whatnot? That can be your source of modulation to anywhere inside the sequencer.
Yeah, and I think that MIDI is actually, well, it might be in too, but it's primarily out. So like the idea was that you could use this to sequence.
So right now,
external gear.
So right now the in is primarily clock, but he is adding an update that will allow you to record MIDI notes into it as well.
Oh wow, awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah. And I have like I have my MIDI cables are right here for it, just so people can see what I'm talking about. So and this goes to my Matrix Brute, and I'll sequence my Matrix Brute with it sometimes. It's so kick ass.
That's great. Thanks for that. That's a really interesting combination. Those two things work really well together.
The angle of the bends and this thing real quick, just to give you an idea of the sound. So the bends is doing the pitch right now.
So who makes that
the reverb? So these two are coming into the ER301, and they're just controls. You know what I mean? Just control offsets is what I'm doing with that right now. So I have
that module. Sorry,
Warmstar Audio.
Oh, here
and on my channel, I did a really great interview with him, and I say really great because I did it, and I'm American, and apparently it's American to over exaggerate yourself now.
I've just got the module up on the screen so people can see this.
Yeah,
because I hadn't seen this module before. And instead of using it as so you're using it basically to kick out CV, which then goes into the ER301 to change parameters.
Yeah, so it's offset. When you don't have anything plugged into the inputs, they're just offsets, right? Okay. But when you do have something plugged into it, it's like a mixer, right? They're like attenuators. Okay. And then the inputs above that are AB, BC, CD, AC, BD, AD. And what'll happen there is, like, if you send a gate or voltage into this, there's 6 Vactrols inside of here, right? So these are the inputs to the Vactrols that will blend between these channels.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy. Wow. So you can use it to basically turn any filter into like a low pass gate or multi-mode gate. And get that Vactroly gooiness out of it. It's super fantastic. That's another module that's kind of like, under the radar right now. But and it's everything that it does is for the price point that thing hits, it's pretty fantastic.
Wow, cool.
I wanted to show the sound of this thing real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, an example of this, I'm going to be careful with my level here to not kill you guys. I'm sorry, were you talking? Okay.
No.
Okay, I'm just trying to be careful because the levels are crazy. I want to do. So what you're going to hear is I'm going to switch between the speaker output, with it really driven pretty hard, and the regular mix out. So you can kind of get a sense for like the crunchiness that happens.
Wow, yes, that is a real. I'm big into my distortions. I've got it over here. I've currently got over here. I've got this distortion, which is the Strakal Brulu, and then I've also got another smaller distortion which I use. Oh yeah, over here, which I use for kick drums and stuff, which is the Phosphor Drive by Ivan. And yeah, I'm really into that. I'm also down with the distortion that comes out of this Sonic XV when you drive the input of the filter on that. But what we're hearing from that module, the Ana module there, is that's a
what's
completely
great
different
about
sort of crunchy distortion in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like that sound you get from a loaded guitar amp, like solid state guitar amp. And what's cool about it though is that you don't really lose low end. It just makes it kind of crunchy and round, you know, which is super useful. I mean, I use it a ton on my sound design just because you can take a sound that's like, okay, that's kind of cool, and then you can make it sound like vintage and crunchy like in no time with it. So it's super useful. The shoot, there was something else I want. Oh, I just wanted to kind of show this real quick. So you heard the reverb on the drums. This is one of the reasons why I'm loving this module so much. This 301 is before we started the show, James had commented that, you know, it's a little bit too much computer in his modular, you know, and I don't disagree most of the time with a lot of this kind of stuff. But one of the reasons that I got this thing and like it so much is because it's so immediate. And you would think with just one knob on the module, it's not going to be that immediate, but that's actually not the case. All these, this whole block of inputs down here can basically, if you send it offsets, can be knobs. So you have a ton of sources there. But if you look at this reverb, so basically we have here's the sample player here, right? And this is in a chain. So the sample player goes into the freeverb, which then goes into a clock delay, which then goes into a limiter and then out. The limiter is basically set dry right now. But the freeverb is what I wanted to show. Watch this wet here. See if I can show you this. Let me get this cable out of the way. Check this out. This is so dope. You see how it's bouncing?
Yeah. And
you can see there's an envelope in the bottom here. So if I select this, right, now I'm inside that, I'm basically inside that control. And you can see what I'm sending that control. I'm sending it a gate. And then after that gate, I have an ADSR, right? And then you can see the controls of the ADSR. So every time it gets a gate, I'm spiking up the reverb. So it kind of gets this like, I'm spiking and ducking the reverb on it. So as I bring, and then the offset control from Warmstar Audio, the bends, you'll see the size will increase.
Gotcha. Okay.
Nice.
And then, of course, the other one is that pitch. So basically any spot inside of this thing, you can modulate super easy. And that doesn't, you know, these, so for instance, if I wanted to come over here and let's say I had the clock delay, which is bypass right now. If I unbypass that, you would hear, now I can, let's say I want to have it change the divisions, right? So I'm on division now, and here is your input for that. I just select it, and then I can go in here and I can see all my inputs on it. And if I take a cable here, I'll go from D of the bends to D2 here. You're gonna see D will start to spike as I raise this knob. So I can see my control input right there.
Yeah.
I select it, and then you can see it. There's that knob moving around. I can select that and then go back up. So I can set the gain, which is basically an attenuator for that input. And if I'm going to make it go negative. So as I go negative, it'll drop this down a good bit. So here we go. So now I can change these delays. So basically anything in here you can modulate in different ways and kind of connect things different ways. Awesome. And you know, so that's all just one lane, and that's all that sample chopping. The second lane over here is my effects chain for the Ogon accumulator, right? And then the third chain is the effects chain for that, and the second chain is I'm just using it as an ADSR. And then I have another chain on it. If I go to scope and admin, I can see my CPU usage. I'm only at 33%.
That's good.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
that was actually the main reason I got an ER301 was I was going to use it as a mixer because it's got so many inputs on it. I thought I'll just combine all of my oscillators into there and I can apply effects on them. I can
it could be a 16-channel mixer.
Exactly, 16-channel mixer. So I thought that's the way to go. It didn't, I kind of felt like I needed it to be still a bit more tactile, and I realized I was having to use a lot of CV control to turn things on and off. So in the end, I went hardware and got the Bifaco Hex Mix, and
which looks great, by the way. That thing it's big, but it looks really useful.
It is, but I mean, I've got the Hexpander there as well. So yeah, when they're connected together, it does take up a lot, and it's 6 channels, but you've got your returns here as well. So you got 3 returns, and the other cool thing, it's got direct outs on jacks, so I can record stuff, I can multi-track and stem stuff out basically to my computer at the same time, post fader, which is really cool, because it is a performance mixer and I want to record that performance that I'm using. I have a little mix, tiny little mix next to it, a 2 HP, which I send one of the auxiliaries out into this, and it allows me to basically send it to multiple places.
I need that. Yeah, that's super high on my list right now. I want to get that, and I want to get that 2 HP freeze.
Yeah, the freeze is good. I have to pluck, and just going onto mixers because you've got a lot of different mixers in yours. I've just gone for these. I've got some IntelliGel mix-ups, which I recommend. I think they're really, really great little mixers. You got 4 channels. Channel 1, channel 2, and channel 3 has its own attenuator for volume, a mute switch for each one, and then input 4 doesn't have one, but that's okay. And you can drive them a little bit, and they're just solid, nice little mixers. I use this one for combining bass signals. So my dry bass sound goes into input 1, which it sends it to stereo left and right. I have this distortion of the bass going into input 2, and then I have the Torpedo distortion by Roland, and that goes into the stereo input here. So I've got 3 different types of bass, 2 distortion, 1 clean on a little mixer here, basically. And then I take that out and run that into a compressor. just to, you know, it can get a bit raucous, so it just
Mhm.
keeps the signals nice and clean without going too crazy. But yeah, little mixers, eh? You know, they're so useful, and you're evidently showing that in your modular there.
Yeah, I have I can't speak enough about Levitate. That module is ridiculously cheap
Yeah.
for what it is. You know, you have 8 channels on there, and they're also eight offsets. So my eventual plan is to get another Levitate and use that along with the 301, because all those offsets are then physical controls to the ER301.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then you can also split it because it's got switches for if you want the top half to be like a 4-channel mixer, and then the bottom half to be, you know, offsets, you can do that, you know, which is pretty dope.
Yeah, it is a lot more, I guess, a lot more the flexibility than these mix-ups, which are just your traditional sort of volume control.
Yeah.
What you've got going on there is multiple optionality in comparison.
What's your primary output modules that you prefer? Like what you know, what's your final outs if you want to go that route?
Yeah, so so all of my final outputs will be filters. So I hardly have any VCAs. So
Hold
I'll
on,
just
you're
come.
saying that you don't have a final mixer after your filter?
Oh, so no, yeah. So from my filter, I literally take an audio output cable and it goes into my Mackie mixing desk, which is
You
sat
are a
beside of me.
brave man.
Yeah,
But
I've been doing that too. Like I
I go
have
straight
a stereo output on my main case, but it really doesn't get used that much anymore. I just go straight into the Mackie, or I can go out each channel of the Optimix straight into the Mackie if I want to try and mix each voice externally rather than in the modular.
Which Mackie are you guys using?
It looks like Matthew's got a pretty rad one. I'm got a old school 1402.
I used to have the Mackie Onyx just because it was dead easy to use and it was Firewire, but then Firewire kind of became legacy.
Sure.
So I went old school and got this Mackie 32.8, which
Yes.
basically allows me to have, you know, everything that I want on individual channels. And then I have my guitar pedals on the auxiliaries.
Nice.
And then all of these have got direct outputs, which then go down into my sound cards, which are down there. And then that goes multi-tracks into my computer. I also record a stereo out at the same time. But I don't mind the sound of it. I know it's not right, coming from an engineering background, working in some big studios in London, but
you are in like company, sir, because he's going into the Mackie, and I'll show you. I use my Mackie over there as a router as well. And then my primary interface is the Claret 8 Pre X. And and I use that. I absolutely, I can't sing enough praises about that thing. I'm not vested into the UAD platform of plugins and whatnot, and I'm trying to avoid it at all costs because I know what will happen. And I actually like I A/B'd the crap out of that thing, and the latency numbers and this quality of the pre's just really made me happy. So I use that. But yeah, I use the Mackie as like my hub so that I can route everything out. And then I have a patch bay, and then I can kind of go into there. And I have some other interfaces that I'll tie in with ADAT, like the Arturia audio fuse, which the preamps on that thing, you know, bias alert, because like I got to help work on that one. But I will say, like, if you look at the sheer numbers on that preamp, I tried to convince them to let that go as a 500 series module first, because I said people aren't going to take it seriously if it just comes out as an Arturia product. Like they're not going to give it the same look that they would if you came out with it as a 500 series, you know, like much like how Focusrite does their red and, you know, that kind of stuff. So you guys should really do that because the numbers are insane on that thing.
Well, like I was saying, when I go and play live, there's no way I'm going to take out that big Mackie mixer with me. So the way I've got all of this configured means that I can basically stem using these little mixers. Basically, I can stem all the channels together to run into the hex mix, 6 channels, and still run 3 auxiliaries to my effects pedals and have them returned back to here. And I just give the sound person a stereo left and right. And I've got exactly the same setup as if I'm in my studio in terms of sound, or more or less,
That
you know.
does conversion down to guitar pedal level and then back up.
What, the Hexpander?
Yeah.
No, I don't think it
What do you
does.
bring it? What are you attenuating and bringing it back up with for
I
when
don't.
you're interacting with pedals?
I don't. So I go literally straight out this aux and I go straight into the back of my pedals. And that's it. So I've got to be careful with that, particularly with the Strymon stuff. If you hit them a little bit too hard, I don't know if you've found this before, but they will go 100% dry. They just go bang dry, and then you have to, and then
you're overloading. Yeah, okay, I
you're
see.
overloading it, and it tells you, and then you basically have to twiddle the wet dry.
It's nice that it has a safety on it though, because I mean, I will admit I've fried some stuff, so you know that's why that's why when you said you go filter straight, I'm like, yeah, I don't ever do that anymore.
I think you're absolutely right. On the way back though, the Hexpander is pretty cool because you've got a high-low switch, so you can attenuate the level coming back into this, which is cool.
And primarily that's so that Trana module. Another really cool thing about it is that it has 2 modular inputs with attenuators on it, right? Then it also has a line level input that boosts to modular level. Now, what's cool about that is if you plug an output to the line output of the Trana module, it will take that out of the mix, right? So you can use that as a separate boost to send line level signals up to your modular. So a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll attenuate down into a guitar pedal, and then I'll send the guitar pedal into either the anti-module line amp, which is basically 2 of the Trana module line boosting circuits. And it can, when it's turned off, it just becomes a buffered mult. I'll either send it to that. Yeah, and that's a 2 HP module, which is great. Or I'll send it to the Trana module, which does the same thing. It's just 1 channel. But yeah, that it'll boost it back up to modular level, and you know, all inside that one little module, which is awesome.
That's the way to do it. Yeah, I've just got to be careful, but so far I've not had any issues. Gents, I realized we've been on air for nearly 2 hours now. So I'm just going to, like, James, you mentioned you had maybe one other patch you wanted to show with the Renee too. You want to quickly show that? And then
I do have a third one. Hopefully, whoops, caught up on some wires.
This has been great, though. It's been really good chatting.
Yeah, it's been super fun. Hopefully this isn't too difficult to follow because it spans 2 cases. But what I wanted to do was show something I like trying, where I want to get something that sounds like note probability, but you don't have something that lets you set probability. If you have an envelope generator that has like an end of cycle out, like MATTHS does, something that goes high when it's done triggering, and either a sequencer like Renee 2 has a run stop. You can set the mod input to control running or not running. Like Brains has that too. It's do I have it? Yeah, the run input on Brains is similar. And at the end, I can even say how to do it without that feature. But so what I've got going on here is the end of cycle out on this channel of MATTHS goes into the mod input on R2. And again, that's controlling run stop. And the gate out of the Renee sequence is triggering that envelope. So what's happening is it triggers the envelope. When the envelope's done, it tells the sequencer, cool, you can go to the next step. And then there's just a clock here from Tempe that's clocking Renee. And where the cool part comes in is that clock, let's say it's all the 16th notes, is also generating a random voltage with the nanorand here. And that random voltage is going to be used to control the decay time of the envelope. So what's going to happen is as the decay time gets longer, it's going to take longer for the envelope to go down and finish, which means it'll take longer for that end of cycle to go up. And it'll kind of hold the sequencer on that step until the envelope finishes. So what you end up getting is like random lengths of notes, but the notes will always start on some 16th note. So they're in time, but the length of the note will change duration. Let me get the sound going, and then we can totally hear that. Okay, so here you can hear it's pretty regular 16th notes. And if we start to mix in that random voltage amount.
Wow, okay.
I love that.
So as you can see here, it's going to wait on each stage until the envelope basically finishes decaying, and then we'll jump to the next stage. And of course, that'll be dynamic depending on how much, random voltage you feed in. Yeah, so I like that trick a lot. It's not something I always necessarily do live or whatever, but again, if you want to have something that has kind of a probabilistic sound, but you don't have a way to set probability. And in fact, this really isn't probability. It's like note length probability, I guess.
So does it do anything if you attenuate it the other way? If you go negative on the random?
Yeah, it would kind of do the reverse. So like what I did here is I set the envelope pretty short, and then the random voltage is making the note longer. So what you could do is have, the envelope longer and then add negative voltage, and then it would just adjust the fall. Now, the only thing where this kind of falls apart is if you're doing a long attack time, because most envelopes will reset if a trigger comes in and the attack is still going up, which kind of ruins this example. But if you're doing like most notes where it's like short attack, long decay, it works fine. Or if you happen to be lucky enough to find the envelope that doesn't re-trigger, you're safe. Now, if you wanted to do this same example with a sequencer that didn't have a run-stop control, it just like advances a step every clock.
Sorry, James, you want to just stop your sequencer a minute?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
So if you wanted to do this with a sequencer that didn't have a run-stop control, it's just every pulse it goes forward one. It's basically the same thing. You just want to take your clock signal and the end of cycle output and put them both into a AND logic module. And what that will do is the clock won't go to the sequencer until the envelope has finished its cycle. And then once they're both high, then it'll send a clock pulse. The sequencer will trigger the envelope, and it starts that loop again.
Wow, dude, that is.
I use the anti-module logic object for that because it's got the flip flops, it's got the and, the or, and all that, and just playing with that logic is, oh man, you can come up with such cool rhythms. I love that trick with the MATTHS though, because I'll definitely be doing that.
Yeah, it's really fun, and the fact that you can sort of dynamically play with it, either manually but with a random CV, gets really fun. And I didn't have anything that I could quickly patch up for drums, but it's pretty neat with drums because, like I said, even though the note length is going to be random, it's always going to start a new note in time with whatever your master clock is, or whatever's clocking the sequence that's triggering the MATTHS. And then if you turn off gates, we could listen to that really quick. You kind of get like ghost notes because it doesn't stop. It just kind of skips it. Oh, whoops, that's the wrong page. That literally was skipping steps. Oh, we got to have the random going. It'll just basically like pass through those stages at the shortest envelope time. Not mind-blowing, but it's a little interesting to.
I like that. No, it's those little things like that that'll take a patch from like, okay, this is pretty cool too. This is what I couldn't do in anything else, really. Yeah,
exactly. But that's a fun one. I always find that end of cycle output a really useful thing. I kind of wish it like both sides of MATTHS had end of rise and end of cycle. But like functions got it, contours got it. I have enough envelopes with that that output. That and it ends up being one of those things where it's like if I need another envelope module, I pretty much need to have that because I use it for so many different things.
Yeah.
PM
Wow, that's
for
great.
maths.
Yes.
Maths is the savior. I mean, I use maths as a CV mixer. You know, channel 1 and channel 4 has got its own envelope, so I just mix those together, and then I put something into channel 2 from somewhere else, and then I use the third one just as an overall attenuator for all of the signals. And I just take that sum and I just run that in envelopes for my filters. But then you've got the end of cycles, and oh, man, it is true. Maths is such a great module. I mean, when I first got it, I bought that as one of my first modules, and I didn't really use it much for the first 6 months or so, and until I really started to understand, I was just like, okay, you can use this for all sorts of stuff. And some great video. I saw a video on it recently where someone's been using it like the subharmonic by Moog, where you can kind of do divisions of the frequency, that you put a frequency into it and divide it down, and you get this kind of two duo voice thing going on. Pretty nuts.
Yeah, there's still so much that I haven't figured out on it. I mean, there's the maths is one of my favorite modules, and it's like, oh, it's so easy to say that, but it's so true. Like, I mean, if you have a maths and you don't love it, there's something wrong with you. I do know people who sold their maths, and I don't agree with any of them.
Okay, well, I think
you have to like challenge yourself to try some of the, less obvious features. It's really easy to just use it as two really great envelopes. So you kind of have to remember to sort of push yourself to learn what the different inputs and outputs kind of can be used for, because it's pretty easy to learn what they do, but then figure out how to use those things, takes some more effort. But that's the stuff I've always really been drawn to in modular, is like, I really like maths because every output and input does the same thing. There's no like mode where now that output is going to behave differently, or this input is used for something else. They're always that. And they may be sort of like odd functions that are not necessarily obviously musical, but then you kind of have to figure out like, what's a musical way I could, well, like kind of like that patch, like what's a musical way I could use this, end of cycle output to do something.
Absolutely. And then there's all the cross patching you can do within the module itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Look, we've been on air for 2 hours now, and I really like to try and keep these shows to about that time. So unless you guys have got anything burning you want to say or show us or discuss, now's the time. If not, I think that's a good place to end it. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to thank you for having us on.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was really fun.
Definitely head over to James' channel, because I know he's got a lot of great content as well. So
thanks.
Yeah, I'll link both James and of course yours, Ken. I'll put you in the description and link that below. So everyone, please do check out James and Ken's YouTube channels and their music and what they're up to. It's really great. I've been watching these guys for a while, stalking them on their shows and seeing what they're up to. So it's really great having you on. Thanks for joining me. And
yeah, absolutely. And Ken, it's great to meet you in virtual person.
Oh yeah, it's great meeting both of you guys. Yeah, for sure. And I will be out at NAMM, so we should definitely try to catch up, because
that'd be awesome. I haven't been out for I think 3 NAMMs now. I had like a 10-year run there.
I usually go I'll go for a few and then I'll skip one, and then I'll go for a few and then I'll skip one.
I'll try and get out there.
It's always tough because that's right around when my kids' birthdays are. So it's tough. But I just wanted to say, as far as like supporting everybody and whatnot, always try to support that kind of stuff, because the modular community is really small, let alone music technology communities in general. My most recent project, if people want to support, is I did a sound pack with MSX Audio and Akai for awesome. the new MPC. So if you check out, it's called Vintage Provider. You should buy it because the sounds in it are phenomenal, and a lot of it came from this gear in here. So definitely go check that out.
Awesome.
What's that called? Vintage?
It's called Vintage Provider. So it's basically a large collection of multi-sampled instruments that you can load up in your MPC Live or MPC X, and it'll work standalone. So if you have like an MPC Live, take it out on the road and you'll have full dope sounding synths right inside of it, you know, without having to use a VST.
Great stuff. Brilliant. And James, what, anything from you, what we should go check out or what you've been up to? I mentioned
yeah, no one's checked out the I released them a couple years ago now. I've been fighting to finally finish. I feel like I have one more album under the Jim Drones moniker that I could knock out. But I did a trilogy. It was about 2 years ago. I finished releasing all three. That's at jimdrones.bandcamp.com. And I'm trying to find as much spare time as possible to get back to videos. I owe a couple people some videos. So definitely before the end of the year, I'll get those out, and trying to find a way to set aside the time to start cranking videos out again. I miss doing it.
Brilliant. And yeah, we'll do. We'll check that out. And thanks for everyone who joined us live today. Inky, Paul, who's a regular, pops into live streams. Eldo, thanks very much. Joe Miller, who we had on the show last time we did this. Thanks for joining us. And State Azure. Go check out State Azure's YouTube channel. I did try and get him on here, but he reluctantly declined. But I understand that. That's cool. But go check out his stuff he's doing in his Instagram. Some awesome stuff. He's doing some stuff with the Belgrade Chaos Devices Belgrade, and it was just the most dirtiest, distorted bass sound. It was gorgeous. So do go check that out. Thanks for joining us again, everyone. And hopefully this has been useful. And like Ken says, all this is really, it's about supporting the community and anyone wanting to get into this. Even if you're still into this, I mean, I've learned loads of stuff today, and I'm going to watch this show back myself and pull some stuff out of here that both Ken and James has talked about for sure. So it's, you know, we're all learning still. That's the beauty of it. So
yeah, absolutely. That's one of the greatest things about these things is, you know, I've had some of these modules since they came out, which would have been probably close to 10 years now, but I'm always finding new ways. And usually it's from talking with other people. I wish there was always an easy way to like have people over to just play with my system. I feel like watching someone else patch your own system, you always learn something new.
Absolutely. And if you haven't got a hardware module, go check out things like VCV Rack. It's mostly free, and it's a great entry point into this. Or like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Nord Modular. Go and have a play with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Reactor blocks.
Reactor blocks.
Reactor blocks.
Definitely.
Max. I mean, even it's not as visually pretty as Max, but PD. It's free. It's open source.
I just got my first taste of pure data the other day, so
nice.
I'm on my way. I'm on my way there.
Nice slice of pure data sandwich. And there's also for those of you that are in for Max for Live stuff, Max for Cats, you've got the Ocelot, which is a kind of modular environment.
And there's some great iOS ones too.
Yeah,
you know? That's true. Yes.
You got Pseudo. You got the actual one called Modular, which is really nice, which gives you a very Eurorack feel. You know, there's some great stuff out there. You know, and then if eventually you tie it in with like a Expert Sleepers ES8, and you could use all that same knowledge right into your hardware. You know, that's what I do. I keep a Surface Pro and I run reactor blocks on it and connect it to the ES8, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, and like anyone who's sort of curious about this stuff, also don't be too afraid to just try some stuff. Don't be afraid. I see a lot of people who seem to be afraid they're going to choose the wrong thing, and you know, you never really know. When I first got into this, I basically made a mini Moog in modular form, and then realized like, oh, I didn't really like that. I don't know why I did that. You kind of have to try stuff and see what really resonates with you personally. And the nice thing is like these things hold their value pretty well. You're not going to like lose a ton of money.
They're usually 80 some odd % of the value. It's like trading cards. Seriously. Like if you buy used, 9 times out of 10, unless it's digital, like digital ones are a little iffy because they can come up with updates and all, but like an actual analog module, it's like, dude, it is what it is. So it's like, down the road, if you resell that, chances are you're not losing very much money on that.
Or even pick up the stuff used.
I I sold my original Phonogene for like $500. I got another one the other day for $260, or yeah, a little less than $260, because they came out with the Morphogene, and I was like, I wanted the more lo-fi sound of the Phonogene. So like, I'm over the moon about that.
Yeah, actually, for folks who are interested in make noise stuff, they rarely, when they release a sort of new version of it, it's different enough that it really doesn't make the old one
Exactly.
obsolete. But people always kind of like sell it right away. So, go pick up your Rene ones for cheap, and your Phonogenes and all that stuff.
Flavor of the month, used Rene's, dirt cheap.
Yeah.
And also, my last parting thought would be, if you get a module, try and just pull out of it as much as you can before you think of selling it. Just start patching it in different ways, and just a different way of how you thought you was going to use it. And generally, you can pull some new magic out of it that might make you hang on to it a little bit more. It's nothing worse than selling a module and then looking around to find a module and then realizing the one you've just sold actually does something that you're after, just because you didn't try out something. So yeah, experiment with it all, have fun, and yeah, we'll leave it there. So thanks again, guys, for joining us in the chat room. Ken, James, awesome, nice to meet you. And if you've enjoyed this, everyone, please thumbs up, give us a like, and subscribe. See you later, everyone. Thank you.